All right. So today I'm going to start where I ended the last time I was here in the hot seat. And that is with the meta prayer that I closed with. And that prayer is, may all beings be peaceful. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings awaken to the light of their true nature. May all beings be free. So, this is a lovely prayer. And these are beautiful things that I do want for myself and all beings and others. And over the last few weeks, I have come to a new take on it. Um, and this started because I was reading a email from the Center for Action and Contemplation. I signed up for their radical resilience emails. I thought radical resilience sounded pretty awesome. And it's literally like a 5 minute read. And that's been my Lectio Divina, because that 5 minutes is about all I seem to be able to manage. So this particular one came about a week after my talk, and it featured Lama Rod Owens, who I'd never heard of. And he's got a new book coming out. It's called The New Saints. And the phrase that caught my attention was, freedom isn't a feeling, it's a state of being. And it caught my attention for a few reasons. One is that I've been struggling with this hierarchy, oppressive, with one particular group at the top and everybody kind of squished down underneath, and how to get free from that. And I have to say, like, this was radical news to me. Talk about radical resilience. I mentioned it to Joe and he was like, oh yeah, like he already knew this. Well, I didn't. Hopefully this is interesting to some of you. But what it occurred to me is that, if freedom is a state of being, it's kind of like saying love isn't a thing you do, it's what you are. Or you are not a person with a soul, you are a soul. Like, it is a birthright. And so it's the truth of who I am on a soul level. And it also means that I decide. I am the one who has agency and power and control over freedom. It is not dependent on some exterior state. It comes from within. And so, because the world doesn't hand it to me, the world can't take it away either. So, that I mentioned the story that I'm working on right now is this one that the culture tells us about the hierarchy, who's at the top and who falls underneath. And the ways in which I have unconsciously, mostly, agreed to this story and participated in it. So when I'm doing the work to unlock that freedom within myself, what my job is to uncover these stories and to determine whether they hold any truth or not. And so in order to do that, in order to do the uncovering, I need to get really clear on what they are. So digging into the different narratives. And as I do that, I become closer to the truth of who I am. It's another way of saying removing the veils that stand between me and the divine. And I think that this is an important realization that I had, which is, I can be mad all I want at those people who are, hanging on to their power tooth and nail. But they're also caught up in their own false narratives. They are not free either. I think I had this misunderstanding that, well, oh my God, like, they're free, they can do whatever the hell they want. And actually, that's not true. So this really changes how I feel about it. I can let go of some of my resentments and some of my anger. and it changes what I want to do about it. Like when I'm coming from that place of anger and resentment, I want to take a flamethrower to it and burn it down. And that seems like a good solution. But when I'm coming from this deeper understanding, I realize that that's just retribution. That's not solving the problem at all. That's an eye for an eye. That's just exchanging one tyrant for another, which is not my end goal. So I think, this has unlocked a deeper meaning for me. And I wonder too, just for a minute, imagine what this world could be like if we all sort of woke up from these false stories, these illusions, these narratives that aren't really true. What if, for example, this myth that whiteness reigns supreme were to go, were to be discarded, because we would wake up and realize that that is not true. So now when I say that meta prayer and I say, may all beings be free, this is what I'm talking about. May all beings wake up from the dream of their stories. And may we all get to know, get closer to that brilliant diamond nature that every single one of us is. I can also see that more clearly too. I admit I struggle a little to see some people as having a diamond nature. So when I think of this, it really has helped me even widen that circle more. And it made me think of that quote by Merton that we all love, or at least I do. We make ourselves real by telling the truth. Yesterday during Joe's talk, I had a little epiphany about this. On the surface, and my initial understanding of that was that I always thought that pointed towards being authentic. And it does. I think authenticity is very important. And it's a great goal. But underneath that, what I see is that telling the truth means to see with clarity, to get underneath the stories, to let the mud in Joe's jar settle, so that we can make ourselves real, or in other words, get closer to embodying the divinity that lives within all of us. So that I have now a different take on that whole idea of we make ourselves real by telling the truth. And instead of like being authentic and like letting you all see who I am, that exterior thing, it's also kind of turning that inward, telling myself the truth, getting closer to that divine spark that lives within me. And so I think, this is a beautiful vision. Like, yes, let's do this. There's a but. And I mean, this is based on my personal experience and my own practice. Things get a little gnarly before I can get to the good stuff. And yesterday, Joe was talking about the Via Transformativa. Here we are. That's what this is. And like, transformation, fabulous. Like, why don't we grab it? Well, because it's hard. Transformation disrupts the status quo. And if I look back at that meta prayer, transformation threatens keeping the peace, being happy and comfortable, and even safety. So there's some motivation to kind of stay here, because that's a little shaky. If I want to stick with peace and happy and comfort, I might not want to dig into the truth. And so that's why these messy things get shoved into our unconscious. And if I come back to the current bear I'm wrestling with, this power structure, as that facade wears off and I start to see the things that were previously hidden from me, literally blind to them, I'm starting to become very painfully aware of the harm that has come from me, like sticking with the party line. And that is both externally, in our culture, in our society, for me and others, and internally. I talked about the invisible self-harm. And there's a lot of harm that has come that I have done to myself by swallowing these stories and believing the truth of I am less than some other people in our culture. And there's another one that I need to admit to. There's another truth here, which is more painful to me, is that in some ways I have benefited from this current power structure. You know, with my privilege, my whiteness, my relative, I can pay my bills. I'm not poverty stricken. I figure I fall somewhere in like the upper middle. And so that means, to cling to this like shaky house of cards that I think provides me some safety and security, I've had to like keep it going. And I have to ask myself, like, how have I participated in this status quo? How have my actions been oppressive to other people? And, that's kind of an ugly truth, but I have to see the whole thing in order to let it go. And I have to be willing to give up comfort, to give up my illusion of security, this belief that it keeps me safe. And that reminds me of Rumi and his guest house, opening the door wide and letting all of it in, the good, the bad, the ugly, the rage, the grief, the remorse. And that is going into the darkness. That's traveling inward. And I'll go back to the hero's journey, out into the deep, dark wood or down into the darkness of my unconscious. And as with any hero's journey, we have to drop our weapons. We cannot wear our armor, all of those things that the ego tells us we need, like Inanna's descent that I talked about, taking off every scrap of clothing until we arrive at the center, which is truth. But even though we lose all of those things, can't take any of them with us, there is one thing that we do take with us. And it's actually the most powerful force on earth. And that is love. And I don't mean the Valentine's Day kind of love. I mean the love that moves the sun and all its stars. I mean the force. Let the force be with us. It reminds me of Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion, and she is a tsunami of love that takes out anything that is not love. And reminder, yesterday, Joe talked about it, the Buddhist view of love. It's wisdom plus compassion. So we are not going in defenseless. We are actually very well prepared to do this work. And when I bring wisdom and compassion to these unconscious places, the darkness, that is the key to transformation. That's where it all happens. That is how forgiveness, which is the Aramaic kind of forgiveness, not letting you off the hook, but that unraveling and undoing of wrong perception can happen. And we get to the root. And when we operate from that truth of who we are transformed both internally first, and then externally. And that is where the work is. And so this reminded me of a couple of things. So I'm going to let Yeshua, also known as Jesus, but I prefer Yeshua, and Mary Magdalene to have the last word. The first is the seventh beatitude, as rendered by Joe. Ripening are the empty, who can be peace in the very midst of war, who can truly be in this world, but not of it, and who can become younger with each passing day. And the reason I read that is because of, my favorite phrase, being in this world, but not of it. Holding both. Yes, the patriarchy is still a thing. I myself am not going to take it apart. And I can still be free no matter what is going on. And I can do the work to liberate myself. And as I do that, systems have to follow. And I'm clearly working on my doctorate of paradox with that. And then the second thing I wanted to share is from Megan Watterson. And I got another deck of cards, guys. This is the Mary Magdalene Oracle. And she has a little bit to say about freedom. And I'll just read that. What makes freedom so powerful is that it's not dependent on anything outside of us. It doesn't arrive because of a single event or a singular person in our life, no matter how significant. Freedom comes from within. So we can experience freedom in the midst of the most tremendous pain or the most stressful circumstances. Freedom is not bound to anything that's temporary. Freedom is the glorious inner state of peace we can reach when we've unbound ourselves from all the egoic state that confine our perception. Freedom is our birthright. We are called here to be free, both externally and internally, free from persecution, free from oppression, free from others causing us harm, and free from our own thoughts that harm us from within. We are here to free ourselves and be in service of a love that actively works to end oppression in all its forms. And with that, I think we can end the recording.